Night fell slowly over the dense forest, where each tall, gnarled tree seemed to whisper ancient secrets. It was a place of profound silence, interrupted only by the sound of the wind through the leaves and the occasional rustle of some nocturnal animal. Dona Helena, at 92 years old, felt the penetrating cold of the air as her tired eyes observed the unfamiliar surroundings. She was sitting on a mossy rock, with a thin blanket over her shoulders, unable to believe she had been left there. That place, dark and isolated, was his only shelter now. She still held in her hands a small bag with a few items: a piece of dry bread, an almost empty bottle of water, and an old rosary, the only object that connected her to the past. Everything had happened so quickly. Her son, Mauricio, with whom she had lived for years, had driven there in disturbing silence. He didn't give her many explanations, just whispered vague words about the difficulty of taking care of an elderly woman and how there were no other alternatives. The look he had given her as they left the house was unlike any other she remembered seeing from her son. It was a cold look, devoid of any trace of compassion. When they reached the deepest point in the road, he simply stopped the car, helped her out, and turned his back to her. She begged him to reconsider, to not leave her there alone, but her words fell into crushing silence. The sound of the car engine echoed, and soon disappeared, leaving only emptiness. With her heart broken, Dona Helena tried to understand what had happened. She had always been a dedicated mother, who sacrificed herself for Mauricio throughout her life. She raised him alone after her husband's early death and never hesitated to put his needs above her own. It took years of hard work and sleepless nights to ensure that Mauricio had everything he needed. And now, at 92 years old, she found herself abandoned, as if she were a disposable burden. The feeling of betrayal was overwhelming. She wondered how her son, the one she had dedicated her entire life to, could do something so cruel. Did she ever truly know him? The hours passed slowly and heavily. The darkness of night enveloped the forest like a cloak, and the silence around it felt overwhelming. The thin blanket that covered her shoulders was not enough to contain the cold of the night, which penetrated her fragile bones, making her shiver. Without the strength to walk and with tired legs, Helena adjusted herself as best she could on the rock. All around him, he heard the sound of branches snapping and leaves moving, which only increased his fear. She felt completely vulnerable, at the mercy of the forest, and the absence of any other human being left her even more desolate. Despite her tiredness, Helena couldn't sleep. His mind was filled with memories of a life that now seemed distant and meaningless. She remembered the stories she told Mauricio when he was a child, the nights she took care of him during his fevers, the smiles and small joys they shared. Each of these memories made her question what she could have done wrong, where she had failed to deserve such a fate. But the only answer that came was the silence of the night, cold and indifferent. Her once unshakable faith now wavered between hope and despair as she wondered if God had abandoned her just like her own son. Dawn advanced, and Helena felt her body begin to weaken. Hunger, cold, and fatigue took their toll. She realized that if she wanted to survive, she would need to gather the strength to get out of there at dawn. But how? The forest was vast and unknown, and his health was poor. With each breath, she felt weakness spread through her limbs, making it difficult to even stay awake. It was then that she picked up the rosary she held with such devotion, slowly running her fingers over the time-worn beads. He began to mutter a prayer, seeking comfort and strength in his faith. If this is my end, at least it won't be in vain, he thought. While praying, Helena felt a light breeze that seemed to caress her face, almost as if it were a response. A strange feeling of calm enveloped her, as if someone were at her side. It was a brief but powerful moment, and although she didn't know where the feeling was coming from, she felt slightly comforted. With her eyes closed, she continued her prayer, trying to ignore her fear and focusing only on her faith. Something inside her said that, somehow, this wouldn't be the end. When the first sign of dawn appeared on the horizon, bringing a faint orange hue through the trees, Helena opened her eyes. The night had been long and terrifying, but she had survived. The sun, still shy, illuminated the forest softly and gently, and for a moment she felt like the light was a promise of something more. What exactly would happen from now on? She didn't know, but she was determined to gather all the strength she had left. When the sun finally illuminated the forest, Dona Helena felt reborn, as if the light brought with it new energy. The light revealed details of the environment that she had not noticed during the night. Huge trees, covered in moss and dry leaves, spread across the ground, creating a kind of natural carpet. Although the setting was isolated, there was something welcoming about the way the sun's rays penetrated the foliage, casting soft shadows all around her. For the first time since being left there, Helena felt a small spark of hope. After all, the daylight not only illuminated the forest, but also his tired and wounded heart. With dawn, Helena was able to move better. Her legs were still weak and painful, but she knew she needed to try to get out of there, even if the effort cost her what little energy she had left. Before making any decision, she looked for something to drink. The water bottle was almost empty, but those few sips were enough to cheer him up. After taking a deep breath and standing up with difficulty, Helena looked around, trying to identify a direction to follow. She didn't know where to go, but she understood that staying still was not an option. With each step, I mentally sought the strength I had so often found in faith. While walking through the forest, Helena began to hear sounds that brought a certain tranquility, such as birdsong and the distant murmur of running water. These sounds, which might previously have gone unnoticed, now represented a connection to life and hope. The idea that there might be a stream nearby brought new enthusiasm, and Helena decided to head in the direction where the sound of the water seemed to be coming from. Each step was difficult and painful, but the simple goal of finding the stream gave him the motivation to keep going. She knew that if she could get water, her chances of survival would increase considerably. The path through the forest was not easy. Roots covered the ground, forcing her to swerve and lean on branches to keep her balance. With each small obstacle, Helena felt her strength diminish, but the image of the stream and the promise of fresh water drove her forward. In a moment of weakness, she almost fell, but held on to a tree and continued. "I can't give up now," she muttered to herself, trying to silence the tiredness invading her body. Dona Helena knew that this effort was a test of resistance, proof that she still had the strength to fight for her life. After almost an hour of slow and careful walking, Helena finally saw the stream. The sound of the water grew louder, and the brightness of the sun reflecting off the small waves made her smile for the first time since she was abandoned. Kneeling on the bank, she reached out with trembling hands to pick up the water and drink. The feeling of cool, pure water sliding down your throat was an indescribable relief. She felt revitalized, and that small victory lit a spark of confidence in her heart. "I can still win," he thought, as he took a deep breath, allowing himself to believe that survival was possible. Sitting by the stream, Helena reflected on what had happened to her. For a moment, she thought about how hard life had dealt her the last few years. The relationship with Mauricio, which had always been the center of her life, had deteriorated over time, but she never imagined that he would be capable of such a cruel act. The pain of betrayal was great, but something in his heart told him that his journey was not over yet. She passed her hand over her rosary, as if seeking comfort in that which had always given her strength. "I knew I needed to forgive to move forward, but I still couldn't completely let go of the resentment." In the midst of her thoughts, Helena noticed movement in the distance. A figure approached, moving slowly through the trees. His heart quickened, filled with uncertainty about who it could be. Would it be Mauricio returning to look for her, or some other unknown person? She hid behind a tree, fearing it might be someone with hostile intentions, but curiosity made her take a closer look. The man, with gray hair and a tired posture, appeared to be an ordinary hiker. He approached the stream, looking around as if he was looking for something. When the man bent down to drink water, Helena, still hesitant, decided to reveal herself. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice shaking. The man looked up, surprised to see her there, an elderly woman in the middle of the forest. He watched her carefully, but his gaze was warm and friendly. "What are you doing here alone?" he asked, clearly worried. Helena, with a choked voice, told him part of the story, omitting details, but making it clear that she was left there with no one to help her. The man, whose name was Jorge, offered immediate help, and at that moment, Helena felt that chance had placed someone in her path to bring her back to safety. Jorge, the man Helena had met in the stream, was an experienced hiker used to exploring that forest. He used to visit the place for moments of reflection and escapism, seeking the silence and peace that nature offered. Upon hearing Helena's story, he was incredulous and touched by her situation. It was inconceivable to him that someone could abandon an elderly, defenseless woman in such an isolated place. "Don't worry, Dona Helena. I'll get you out of here. I can't leave you alone," he said in a firm, gentle tone. These words brought indescribable relief to Helena's heart, who could hardly believe that she had found a savior. Jorge offered Helena part of the food and water supply he was carrying. He took an extra blanket from his backpack, wrapping it carefully around her shoulders to keep her warm. While she ate slowly and took a few more sips of water, Jorge observed her condition, clearly worried. He knew that Helena's health was fragile, and that last night's wear and tear had left marks. "We need to get out of here as quickly as possible," he said, as he studied the best route to get them back to the main road. Helena, although still tired, felt that she finally had a chance to escape that cruel situation. During the walk, Jorge held Helena's hand, supporting her whenever the terrain became steeper or unstable. He adjusted the pace of her walk, making sure she could rest whenever necessary. As they continued, he asked more about her life, and little by little, Helena began to trust him more, revealing details of her life and her troubled relationship with her son. Jorge listened attentively, maintaining a compassionate and respectful expression. He didn't judge, he just encouraged her to keep going, providing her with a safe space to express the pain and confusion she carried. As Helena shared her stories, she felt less alone. Jorge was an attentive listener, and his presence was comforting. For the first time in a long time, she felt like someone truly cared about her, not as a burden, but as a valuable human being worthy of respect. She realized that, even in the face of abandonment, there were still good and kind people in the world. This realization was like a balm for Helena's wounded heart, which was beginning to find small reasons to believe in goodness again. When they stopped to rest, Jorge took a piece of paper and pencil and began to sketch a map of the forest, explaining to Helena the path they still needed to take to get out of there. He said if they continued at this pace, they would reach the road before dark. Helena observed every detail, impressed by the man's patience and dedication. She felt safe knowing he knew exactly what to do. That gave him the strength to continue, despite the fatigue that his body insisted on imposing. During the walk, Jorge also talked about his own life. He was a widower and, like Helena, knew the pain of loss. He confessed that the forest was his refuge, where he came to find peace and deal with his homesickness. The exchange of stories and experiences brought the two closer together, and Helena began to see Jorge as a friend, someone who understood her on a deep and true level. Both had scars from the past, and this connection brought them together, creating a sincere and unexpected friendship in the midst of that desolate scenario. When they finally saw the road in the distance, Helena felt a wave of relief and gratitude. Every painful step he had taken since dawn was finally paying off. She looked at Jorge, her eyes teary with emotion, and said, "I can never thank you enough for what you did for me." Jorge just smiled and held her hand firmly. "We are together, Miss Helena. You deserve to be safe and well." Those words touched Helena deeply, who realized the value of true friendship in times of trial. When they arrived on the road, Jorge saw a passing car and managed to signal it to stop. The driver, a young boy, agreed to take them to the nearest city, where Helena could rest and, with help, decide what to do from there. During the journey, Helena looked out the window, observing the forest in the distance, as if she was leaving behind not only the place where she was abandoned, but also the sorrows and suffering she had carried for so long. Upon arriving at the nearest city, Dona Helena could hardly believe that she had escaped the loneliness and danger of the forest. The familiar sounds of traffic and the movement of people made her feel safe again, as if she were coming back to life after being lost in a nightmare. Jorge, still by her side, made sure she had all the help she needed. He took her to a small cafe where they could sit and drink hot coffee. Helena, as she held the cup in her hands, felt the warmth not only on her skin, but also in her heart, which was now calming down with the certainty that she was in good hands. While they drank coffee, Jorge began to plan his next step. He suggested that they go to a nearby police station to report what had happened. Helena, although reluctant at first, knew she needed to take some action regarding abandonment. Telling others about Mauricio's actions seemed painful to her, but she understood that remaining silent about what happened could put other vulnerable people at risk as well. Jorge's presence calmed her, and with his help, she gathered strength to face what came next. They both finished their coffee and walked together to the police station, where Jorge briefly explained the situation to the officer on duty. At the police station, Helena was met by a social worker who patiently listened to her story. During the testimony, Helena relived every painful detail of the previous night, and the memories made her eyes fill with tears. The social worker observed her with compassion, taking notes and asking some details about her relationship with her son and how he had taken her to the forest. At the end of the statement, the police officer in charge stated that they would take action and would investigate Mauricio's whereabouts. For Helena, this promise brought a mixture of relief and apprehension. Although he wanted justice, he knew that facing Mauricio would be emotionally exhausting. After the statement, Helena was taken to a temporary shelter for the elderly, where she could rest and receive the necessary care. Jorge, who had accompanied her throughout the process, insisted on taking her to the location, ensuring that she was safe. On the way, Helena expressed her gratitude to him countless times. "I can never thank you enough, Jorge. If it weren't for you, I don't even know what would have happened to me," she said, moved. Jorge just smiled and replied, "You deserve to be well and safe. It's a pleasure to be able to help." His look was sincere, and Helena felt that, in some way, that meeting was a gift from destiny. At the shelter, Helena was warmly welcomed by the staff, who quickly provided her with a comfortable bed and a hot meal. After days of uncertainty and suffering, she felt a peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. The staff treated her with care, helping her settle in and making sure she had everything she needed. When she went to bed that night, Helena felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Even though she was safe, she still felt incomplete. The void left by Mauricio's betrayal weighed heavily on her heart, and she knew she would need time to overcome the pain. The next morning, Helena woke up with new energy. She realized that, despite the pain, the support she received gave her the strength to start over. The shelter assistants were kind and attentive, and Jorge, faithful to his commitment, returned to visit her and find out how she was doing. With each conversation with him, Helena felt that she found a true friend, someone who understood her and genuinely cared. Jorge, in turn, seemed to have become fond of her and shared stories from his own life, creating a special connection between them. Helena began to feel that she was no longer alone and that she could count on someone during this difficult time. During one of the conversations, Jorge spoke about his own loneliness and how his life had changed after the loss of his wife. He explained that the forest was a place where he sought peace. But now, in helping Helena, he realized that true comfort came from human connections, love and mutual support. Helena, touched by his words, realized that the meeting with Jorge was more than a coincidence. They both needed each other to overcome their pain and rediscover the value of life. And so, between one conversation and another, the two began to share not only stories, but also hope for a new beginning. Little by little, Helena found herself immersed in a calm and welcoming routine. At the shelter, she made friends with other elderly people with equally tragic and inspiring stories, who motivated her to move forward. She found comfort in their company and felt like this was a place where she could finally heal. Jorge's presence, always faithful and present, was a constant reminder that, despite Mauricio's abandonment, there were still good people in the world. He encouraged her to get involved in shelter activities and rebuild her life with dignity and strength. In the following days, Helena began to discover new aspects of herself. The trauma of abandonment had shaken her deeply, but at the same time, It had awakened in her a determination that not even she knew she possessed. Each morning at the shelter was an invitation to something new. She signed up for the activities offered and began participating in crafts and reading classes. Through these activities, he not only distracted himself from painful memories, but also rediscovered skills and interests that had lain dormant for years. For the first time, Helena felt that she had control over her own life. Activities at the shelter kept her busy and helped strengthen her self-esteem. With each small project completed, like a painting or a clay vase, Helena felt stronger and more confident. The praise he received from other elderly people and shelter staff also helped fill the void left by his son's rejection. Furthermore, she realized that her company was valuable to those around her. People sought out her stories and advice, and Helena felt useful again, as if her life experience had a purpose in helping others. While dedicating herself to these new activities, Helena also continued to strengthen her friendship with Jorge. He visited her frequently, and the two began exploring the city together on weekends, on trips that included parks, cafes, and small local museums. Jorge was an affectionate companion and always made a point of showing how much he admired Helena's strength. "You are an inspiration to me, Miss Helena. The way you overcame all of this is admirable," he said once, as they walked through the park. Helena, moved, realized how much that friendship brought her peace and a new meaning in life. One of the most moving moments for Helena was when the shelter's management suggested that she lead a conversation circle among the elderly. The idea was that she could share her life story, her struggles and overcoming, encouraging others to also open up and find strength in their journeys. At first, Helena was afraid of reliving the hurt. But, upon seeing the sincere interest of the other residents, she accepted the invitation. He prepared carefully and, on the day of the conversation, he shared his challenges, his pains, and the lessons he learned throughout his 92 years. The conversation circle was a success. Helena realized that, by sharing her story, she was helping others deal with their own pain and seek a new perspective on life. Each story inspired and encouraged those present, who identified with their words. Upon seeing the positive impact her story had, Helena felt fulfilled and happy. For the first time in a long time, she realized that her voice had value and that her experiences, even the most painful ones, could be turned into lessons for those around her. This discovery made her feel alive in a way she hadn't experienced in a long time. The experience also brought a sense of healing to Helena. Sharing her hurt, her fears, and her feelings of abandonment helped her process and release some of the pain she still carried. The acceptance of other elderly people and the emotional support she received during conversations were fundamental for her to find peace. Every day, Helena felt lighter, as if the scars of the past were becoming less visible and less painful. The forest and abandonment were still part of his story, but now they were just chapters, not the final destination. Over time, Helena came to be seen as a leader at the shelter. The other residents admired her and sought her out to talk, as if she were some kind of counselor. Helena felt grateful and renewed when she realized that her life had a purpose, even at a time when many believe that old age is just synonymous with loneliness and dependence. She had become an example of overcoming, and this motivated her to move forward with courage and optimism. Deep down, she knew that none of this would have been possible without the support of Jorge and the friends she had made at the shelter. In one of her conversations with Jorge, Helena confessed that, even in the midst of all the difficulties, she felt grateful for everything she had experienced, as each experience shaped her and brought her to that moment. Jorge, moved, held her hand and said he was also grateful for having found her. "You changed my life, Dona Helena. I've been a better man since the day I met you," he declared with a sincere smile. At that moment, Helena realized that, despite all the losses, there was still a lot to live for, and she was ready to enjoy every moment. A few months after arriving at the shelter, Helena received news that made her relive the pain of the past. The investigations into Mauricio had advanced, and he would be called to give a statement about the abandonment. Local authorities were determined to hold him accountable for his actions. Upon learning this, Helena experienced a mixture of feelings. On the one hand, he wanted justice, but on the other, he feared the emotional consequences of this reunion with his son. In conversations with Jorge and the shelter's assistants, she opened up about the internal conflict she felt. "He's my son, despite everything," he murmured, his eyes filling with tears. The shelter staff and Jorge encouraged Helena to view this situation as an opportunity to gain closure. They knew how painful it was for her to relive the abandonment, but they also believed that facing Mauricio could help her finally heal from the resentment she still carried. After much reflection and a few sleepless nights, Helena decided she was ready to face the past. She knew that pain was inevitable, but she also believed that by facing Mauricio, she could find peace and perhaps even forgive him. On the day scheduled for the testimony, Helena felt restless and anxious. Jorge's presence by her side was essential to calm her down. He reminded her that no matter what happened, she was no longer alone and she had people who loved and supported her. Upon arriving at the police station, Helena met with the lawyer who had been assigned to accompany her during the testimony. He assured her that everything would go smoothly and that she would have the time she needed to express her words. Helena took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. Shortly afterwards, Mauricio arrived, accompanied by his own lawyer. The reunion between mother and son was silent, but the looks they exchanged were filled with hurt and guilt. Helena observed Mauricio's face, trying to find traces of the boy she had raised with so much love. He looked worn and hesitant, as if he too felt the weight of the situation. During the testimony, Helena was able to express the pain she felt when being abandoned, every feeling of fear and loneliness. She spoke firmly but also with compassion, making it clear that her goal was not revenge, but justice and recognition. Mauricio listened in silence, visibly affected by his mother's words. When it was his turn to speak, he began with a half-hearted apology, trying to justify his actions. He cited financial difficulties, personal problems, and even mentioned the emotional toll of caring for an elderly woman. However, upon seeing Helena's disappointed look, he seemed to recognize the seriousness of his mistakes. "I don't know how to ask for forgiveness, Mom. I know what I did was unforgivable," he said, his voice breaking. Helena, despite the pain, listened to him with empathy. Although his words didn't erase what had happened, she sensed a sincerity that surprised her. After the statement, Helena had a moment alone with Mauricio, where they could talk without the presence of lawyers and police officers. In that brief dialogue, mother and son opened their hearts. Helena, with a calm voice, explained that she had never stopped loving him, but that he would need to deal with the consequences of his actions. "Love doesn't mean ignoring what you've done, but I also know that forgiveness is the first step to moving forward," she said. Mauricio, remorseful, promised to seek help to deal with his problems and try to rebuild the relationship, if Helena was willing. The legal process continued its course, and Mauricio was sentenced to provide community service, in addition to receiving psychological counseling. Justice, although served, brought Helena a mixed feeling of relief and sadness. He knew that his relationship with his son would never be the same, but the fact that they had reconciled, at least in part, brought unexpected peace. At the shelter, Jorge and his friends celebrated Helena's courage, and she, in turn, felt lighter. The weight of abandonment was still there, but now she could live without resentment. The experience taught her that forgiveness is not a weakness, but a strength that allows us to move forward. For Helena, the reunion with Mauricio was proof that, even in the most difficult situations, it is possible to find paths of healing and acceptance. Life in the shelter continued, and she knew that, despite the wounds, there was still a lot to live and share. After meeting Mauricio and completing the process, Helena felt that her life had gained a new purpose. The experience not only helped her heal the emotional wounds caused by abandonment, but also gave her a desire to transform her suffering into something positive to help others. She realized that by sharing her own story of overcoming and forgiving, she could inspire others to find the strength to face difficult situations. This idea began to grow in her heart, and Helena decided that she didn't want what she had gone through to remain just a painful memory. She wanted her story to serve as a lesson for those who, like her, needed support and guidance. In a conversation with Jorge, Helena shared her new intention. He was immediately supportive, encouraging her to find ways to channel this new energy into something positive. Jorge suggested that she start a support group at the shelter, where elderly people could share their stories and receive emotional support. Helena was excited about the idea. She remembered how the conversation circles at the shelter helped her deal with her own trauma and saw it as an opportunity to replicate that experience for others. It was a way to give them a voice, to allow their pain and joy to be recognized and shared in a welcoming environment. With the support of the shelter and some employees, Helena organized the first meeting of the support group, which she decided to call Voces do Tempo. On the day of the first meeting, Helena was anxious. She prepared a short speech and invited all the residents, hoping that her words would touch the hearts of others. As the seniors began to gather in the small activity room, she felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement. Many faces watched her with curiosity, some with suspicion, but most with a friendly and receptive expression. With a heart full of hope, Helena began to speak, sharing a little of her story and explaining the group's objective. As Helena recounted her journey, the participants' expressions changed. Some discreetly wiped away tears, while others nodded, as if their life stories resonated with Helena's. She realized the power words can have to heal and connect. When he finished speaking, he encouraged others to also share whatever they wanted. Little by little, one by one, the elderly began to open their hearts. They talked about lost loves, memories of youth and challenges faced in old age. Each story was unique and emotionally charged, but they all had one thing in common: the desire to be heard and understood. Little by little, the Voces do Tempo group grew and became a fundamental part of the shelter's routine. Helena, as the group leader, not only facilitated the meetings, but also dedicated time individually to each member, offering words of encouragement and support. She used her life experience to guide and comfort others, and each conversation seemed to further strengthen her own ability to forgive and move on. For the elderly, meetings began to represent a safe space, where they could share without fear of judgment. The group became a refuge, a place where memories and emotions were welcomed with affection and respect. The shelter's management noticed the positive impact of the group and offered full support to Helena so that the project could continue. She even received invitations to speak at other shelters and centers for the elderly, taking Voces do Tempo beyond the walls where it was created. The idea that her experience was helping others filled Helena with deep satisfaction, and she felt that, for the first time in a long time, she had a clear and meaningful purpose. Her emotional scars, although still present, now felt like healed wounds, marks of a history that had strengthened her. As the group grew, Helena felt her heart opening more and more. She allowed herself to love and trust people again, experiencing a type of happiness that transcends the material and the superficial. Each new face that appeared at meetings was another reason for her to continue. She saw in each of them a story waiting to be told and a heart in need of understanding. By creating Voces do Tempo, Helena not only found a way to help others, but also to help herself, becoming a stronger and more resilient person. Jorge, faithful to his role as friend and companion, remained by Helena's side, supporting her in every step of her new journey. He attended meetings, offered words of encouragement, and helped with the group's logistics. The connection between them grew stronger every day, and they both realized that they had found in each other a bond that helped them grow and overcome their own pain. They had transformed an unexpected friendship into a lifelong alliance, and, together, they continued to strengthen Voces do Tempo, creating a legacy of love and solidarity. With the growth of the Voces do Tempo group, the shelter began to receive unexpected attention. Helena's initiative caught the attention of the local community, and soon the group was highlighted in newspapers and social media as an example of overcoming and resilience. Helena felt surprised and moved by the recognition, as she had never imagined that her story could reach so many people. She began to receive visits from people of all ages who came to meet her and attend meetings. The presence of young people and adults who sought to learn from the experiences of the elderly brought new dynamism to the group, which was now an intergenerational meeting point. Recognition, however, also brought challenges. Some people tried to use Voces do Tempo to promote causes and personal agendas, and the shelter's management, together with Helena and Jorge, needed to establish limits to preserve the group's original purpose. Helena felt that her commitment was to the elderly and the genuine community she had created, and that is why she was dedicated to maintaining the welcoming and sincere environment, protecting it from external influences. With Jorge's support, she organized a small committee among the participants to ensure that the group remained true to its initial purpose. At one of the meetings, a new member shared a painful experience of abandonment that had shaken him deeply, and Helena realized that her group was becoming a support network for seniors who faced situations similar to hers. It was as if Voces do Tempo was attracting people who needed to heal and find the strength to move forward. This touched her deeply, and she realized that the group was proof that love and mutual support could transform lives. Excited, Helena decided to expand the group's reach, offering support to homes and shelters in other cities. During one of the trips to share the Voces do Tempo experience in a nearby shelter, Helena was invited to give a talk at a social service college. For her, being in front of young people interested in understanding and supporting the cause of the elderly was a privilege. She told her story with an open heart, and the impact on her audience was immediate. The students were deeply moved, and many came to thank her in person for her courage and determination. "You taught us the true meaning of resilience," said an emotional student. Helena felt that her mission was reaching new horizons. These experiences made Helena reflect on how much she had changed since the day she was abandoned in the forest. The pain and loneliness of then had been replaced by a sense of belonging and purpose. The love and gratitude he received from those around him transformed his life. At the same time, Jorge, always by his side, was a constant reminder that chance can bring us the most precious journey companions. Helena recognized that, without him, she might never have had the strength to create Voces do Tempo. With each new challenge, their friendship grew even stronger. However, the intense work and responsibilities began to affect Helena's health, which was already old. Although she felt rejuvenated by the mission, her body showed signs of fatigue. Jorge, paying attention to the signs, suggested that she slow down. He encouraged her to take care of herself and rest more, as he knew that her energy was essential to keep the group running. Helena was reluctant, but finally agreed to share the group's responsibilities with other participants. She understood that, for Voces do Tempo to last, she would need to count on the help of other people. Dona Helena then chose two of the most active members of the group to help her organize meetings and visits to partner shelters. With this decision, she felt relieved and happy to see that other people were as committed to the project as she was. By delegating these functions, Helena realized that Voces do Tempo was not just hers, but that of everyone who was part of it. It was a collective creation, fueled by love, empathy, and a sincere desire to make a difference. The peace of mind of knowing that the project would move forward allowed her to finally find more balance in her life. Now, with the support of her new partners, Helena was able to dedicate more time to self-care and leisure time with Jorge. They continued to hang out and enjoy each other's company, rediscovering the beauty in the little things in life. They both knew that the time they had was precious and that each day was a gift. Thus, Helena began to live with serenity and gratitude, surrounded by the love of friends and the fulfillment of knowing that she had left a legacy that would inspire many other lives. As time passed, Helena realized how her life was now full of meaning and affection. She reflected on how much she had changed since being abandoned and how she had transformed her suffering into a greater purpose. His group, Voces do Tempo, continued to grow, and the stories that emerged at the meetings were of indescribable richness. With each new share, she felt connected to each person there, understanding that everyone carried burdens and stories that, in some way, had the power to heal and strengthen each other. Helena found peace in seeing that, even in her last years of life, she was contributing to something eternal. One day, Helena was surprised by an unexpected visitor. It was her grandson, Felipe, Mauricio's son, whom she hadn't seen in years. The young man, now an adult, had heard about Voces do Tempo and wanted to know if it was really his grandmother who organized the group. For Helena, seeing Felipe was an indescribable emotion. She had lost contact with him due to conflicts with Mauricio, and now, there in front of her, was her grandson, a link to the past and a new chance to reconnect with the family. Thrilled, she welcomed him with open arms, eager to meet the person he had become. Felipe's visit brought a new wave of joy to Helena's life. He wanted to know everything about the project and the reasons that led her to create it. Upon hearing his grandmother's story, Felipe was moved and, at the same time, embarrassed by what his father had done. Helena, tenderly, assured that she did not hold any grudges and that she had always loved Mauricio, even if the hurt was still present. Life teaches us to forgive and move on. Felipe, I did it and I hope your father can one day too, she said with a serene smile. Felipe, moved, promised to keep in touch and visit her whenever he could. Meetings with Felipe became frequent, and he quickly became involved in the activities of Voces do Tempo. He helped organize meetings and, over time, became interested in managing social projects, inspired by his grandmother's dedication. Helena felt an indescribable joy when she saw her grandson participating in what she had built with so much love. Felipe's presence was a new opportunity to reconnect with her family, and Helena knew that, through him, the flame of her project would continue to live. She shared her experiences and views on life with him, teaching him the importance of respect and empathy towards older people. As Helena neared the end of her journey, she felt a peace she had never experienced before. She had found purpose, reconciled with her past, and created deep, meaningful bonds. On one of her walks with Jorge, she shared this feeling of fulfillment, thanking him for everything he had done for her since the beginning. Jorge, holding her hand, confessed that she had also changed his life definitively. They both realized that they had been essential in each other's journey, and that their friendship was one of the greatest gifts they could have received. In the days that followed, Helena began to organize her belongings and leave instructions for Voces do Tempo to continue after her departure. She asked Jorge and Felipe to take charge of keeping the group active and faithful to its principles. Helena wanted to make sure that the legacy she created would remain and continue to transform lives. Jorge and Felipe, moved, promised to honor his request and keep the project alive, assuring him that his voice and love would continue to echo through their work. With her heart at peace, Helena began to dedicate her days to small pleasures, such as reading, walking through the shelter's gardens and sharing her stories with friends. She enjoyed every moment with serenity, without regrets or resentments. The friendships, Felipe's affection and Jorge's company made her feel full and grateful for everything she had experienced. Even abandonment in the forest, which had been a traumatic experience, now seemed distant and powerless over her. After all, that was just one part of her story, one that propelled her to achieve true happiness and fulfillment. Helena knew her time was approaching, but she was not afraid. She had lived intensely, overcome what seemed impossible and left a legacy for the world. When she thought of her father, her husband, and the people she had loved and lost, she felt that she would soon join them, taking with her the love and wisdom she had shared. She felt ready, not with sadness, but with gratitude. In her last days, Helena was overcome by an almost supernatural tranquility. Each morning was greeted with gratitude, and each conversation seemed charged with deep meaning. The presence of Jorge, Felipe and friends from the shelter made this farewell period lighter and full of love. She felt surrounded by affection, something she had once feared she would never find again after abandonment. At the same time, he felt his legacy was secure. The Voces do Tempo group, which he had created with so much effort, flourished and continued to welcome new stories and people, feeding on the welcoming spirit that she had transmitted to everyone. Jorge, realizing that Helena was getting ready to leave, became closer and closer, ensuring that she never felt alone. In a conversation during a walk through the shelter's garden, he held her hand and said, "You gave me a new life, Helena, and everything he did for others goes beyond what anyone can imagine. Me and everyone here will never forget." Helena smiled and responded affectionately, thanking him for his friendship and unconditional support. For her, Jorge was more than a friend. He was an angel who had appeared in his life when everything seemed lost. The bond between them was like a flame that lit up their final days. Felipe, in turn, was always around, learning more and more from his grandmother. He brought books and magazines to read together, and they often shared laughs and memories of Helena's youth. He loved hearing her stories, which connected him to a part of his own family history. Helena saw in him a continuation of her work and felt fulfilled knowing that Felipe, even though he was young, understood the importance of respecting and caring for his elders. She encouraged him to follow his dreams and continue his mission of helping others, knowing that he would carry forward everything she had taught him. In the last Voces do Tempo meetings that Helena was able to participate in, she was surprised by a tribute prepared by the group's members and the shelter's staff. Each one shared a memory or a word of gratitude for everything Helena had done for them. Many were emotional as they knew her time was coming to an end. Helena, with teary eyes, listened to each word with a heart full of gratitude. She felt that her mission was accomplished, and seeing the impact of her story and her actions on the lives of so many filled her with a deep sense of accomplishment. After the tribute, Helena made the decision that, in her will, she would leave part of the resources she had so that Voces do Tempo could continue to grow and inspire other people. She asked the shelter to use the money to expand the project and allow more elderly people to participate in conversation circles and receive emotional support. The shelter director promised to honor his request and assured that the project would continue to be a source of shelter for many. From that moment on, Helena could rest in peace, knowing that her story would live on and be remembered. In the following weeks, Helena gradually said goodbye to her friends and shelter staff. She made a point of thanking each person, recognizing the value they had in her life and expressing how important each person was in her journey. Each farewell was made with love and sincerity, and Helena realized that she had created a home there, not just for herself, but for everyone she met. Over the years, that place, which was once just a shelter, became a family of hearts connected by love, compassion, and mutual support. On the morning of her departure, Helena woke up feeling a deep peace. Jorge and Felipe were at her side, holding her hands, and she looked at them with gratitude and serenity. His last moments were surrounded by love and presence, exactly as he always wanted. With a light smile, she closed her eyes and left in silence, knowing that her life had left an eternal legacy. That was her final farewell. But the feeling was that her soul was at peace and ready to rest alongside the memories and everyone who loved her. In the days that followed, Jorge and Felipe honored the promise they had made to Helena. They continued Voces do Tempo with dedication and love, ensuring that the project grew and kept the spirit she had cultivated alive. Felipe took the lead with enthusiasm, bringing new ideas and encouraging the participation of people of different ages. The project expanded to other cities, and each meeting, each story shared, was a tribute to Helena's life. His memory was a constant presence, and everyone who knew his story felt inspired to be better people. Thus, Dona Helena became a living legend among those who passed through Voces do Tempo. Her story of overcoming, kindness, and forgiveness continued to inspire generations, and each new member of the group heard about the founder who, even in her most difficult moments, found the strength to transform her pain into love. Helena's life was now a legacy, proof that love and resilience can transform lives and overcome the barriers of time.